Here's a book we're going to look at today, guys. It's called Theodore Roosevelt, the Adventurous President. It's a biography about Theodore Roosevelt. And we're going to learn all about Theodore Roosevelt in this book. Here's the table of contents. Remember, this is the table of contents that gives us information about what each chapter is going to be about in the book. There's even an interview and a timeline at the end. And there's Theodore Roosevelt. And there he is again. And the caption says, Theodore Roosevelt stood still for this photo. It was taken in 1900. So a long time ago. Chapter 1. Teddy takes the lead. It was early winter and the evening was chilly. The President of the United States wanted to take a walk. He left the White House with a few friends. The President was in the lead. The other men hurried to keep up. They chatted and joked when the President laughed. His whole body shook. He threw back his head and flashed a mouthful of white teeth. The group stayed on a straight path. They never turned left or right. They climbed hills and pushed through bushes. Was there a puddle in the way? They splashed right through it. Straight on they went. Then they stopped at the wooded banks of the Potomac River. When you play, play hard. When you work, don't play at all. Words from Theodore Roosevelt. Would the President turn back when he got to that river? No way. He began to undress. So did the others. They piled their clothes on the riverbank. Then one by one they jumped into the water and swam for the other side. This may have been a strange way to act, but not for Theodore Roosevelt. He was the 26th President of the United States, and almost everything about him was unusual. President Roosevelt, or Teddy, was full of energy. He didn't just hike. He boxed, wrestled, played tennis, and rode horses. Teddy liked to keep busy, and he liked to get things done. Once he set a goal, he wouldn't let anything stand in his way. That's why he liked his point-to-point walks. He set out from one point and went straight to another point. He didn't let anything force him off his path, not even the Potomac River. Good timing. Teddy became president in 1901. He was the perfect man for the job, a new kind of president for a new century. He wanted to push the country in a different direction. And here it tells us there's Teddy. He chopped down trees and cleared land for exercise. Things he found that were fun. Times were changing. The U.S. continued to grow. Settlers kept moving farther west. The country's leaders worried about the problems inside the United States. The nation stayed out of the world events. Teddy wanted the U.S. to be a world leader. He wanted it to set big, important goals. Then he wanted the country to march toward its goals, no matter what. He saw the future of the country as if it were a giant point-to-point hike. And he was the man to lead. How did Teddy get to be the way he was? Why did he make the choices he made? To find the answers, you have to go back to the time when Teddy was just beginning his life. And here in this photo, it's showing us people that were heading west. As the United States grew, many people loaded up wagons and headed west. In 1800, there were 16 states. By 1900, there were 45. Chapter 2. Teddy's Busy Boyhood. When Teddy was a little boy, his nickname was Teddy. Later on, people would call him Teddy, but he never liked that name. Teddy lived in New York City. The Roosevelt family had lived there for hundreds of years. Teddy's father was Theodore Roosevelt Sr. He had strong ideas about how people should act. There he goes here. He believed that everyone should work hard. He also believed he had a duty to help others, including those less fortunate. Teddy's mother, Martha, was from Georgia. She was known for her great beauty and her gentleness. And here she is in this corner here. She loved art and music. People called her by her nickname, Mitty. Teddy was born on October 27th, 1858. When he was 2, a terrible war started in the United States, the Civil War. It was a war fought mostly between the northern and southern parts of the United States. Mitty was a Southerner. Her brothers fought in the war on the side of the South. Her husband, Teddy Sr., was a Northerner. He believed in the causes of the North, on the cause of the North. What should he do? He knew it would hurt Mitty if he fought against the South. So Teddy Sr. did not go to war. Instead, he paid another man to fight in his place, and he did work for the Northern Army that didn't involve fighting. There's a picture right here of Teddy, and he was 4 years old. He posed for this photo. Check out his clothes. Teddy felt bad that his father stayed out of the war. He thought fighting was a duty. Years later, in another war, Teddy would jump at the chance to fight. But first, he had to grow up. And here in this caption, it says Teddy was a sickly child. This photo was taken when he was 11. A sickly child. Teddy had 2 sisters, Anna and Corinne. He also had a younger brother, Elliot. All the Roosevelt children had health problems. Teddy's were the worst. He had bad stomach and head pains. He also had asthma. People with asthma have trouble getting enough oxygen into their lungs. Nowadays, there are many medicines for people with asthma. But when Teddy was little, doctors couldn't do much to help. Nights were especially hard for the young boy. When Teddy couldn't breathe, Teddy Sr. would take him for a fast carriage ride. His father would hold him tight as the horses galloped through the dark, empty streets. These rides seemed to help his lungs fill with fresh air. When Teddy was too sick to play, he sat and looked at books. Before he learned to read, he studied pictures. He loved looking at animals best. When he wasn't sick, Teddy was full of energy. It was hard for him to sit still. During trips to the country, he spent all day outdoors. He rode horses, swam, and climbed trees. He was always moving. This is the Roosevelt family here. The picture was taken when they visited Egypt in 1872. Animals everywhere, even in the city. Teddy spent most of his time outside. Often he searched for unusual bugs and animals. He was very interested in studying them. The house was filled with his creatures. He kept snakes in the water pitchers. He kept a snapping turtle in the washroom. Once he tipped his hat to a family friend on a streetcar, and out popped 2 frogs. Imagine his friend's surprise. Teddy was interested in everything about animals. He cut apart dead animals to study their bones. He wanted to know what they ate and how long they lived. Teddy's home museum. Teddy set up a natural history museum at home. Wherever he went, he collected small animals such as frogs and turtles. He even learned how to use chemicals to preserve them, which means to keep them from rotting. The chemicals smelled terrible. So did the dead animals. On family vacations, Teddy's brother Elliot begged to have a separate bathroom. He didn't want to share a sink or bathtub with Teddy's creatures. He drew pictures of birds and insects and described everything he saw. He wanted to be a naturalist, someone who studies plants and animals. As the years passed, Teddy's health did not improve. He was still weak and sick. When he was 12, his father took him aside. "Theodore," he said, "you must make your body. It is hard, dull work to make one's body, but I know you will do it." The young boy took the challenge. "I'll make my body," he said. So his father built him a gym. Teddy exercised for several hours each day. He wanted to build up his chest and his arms. The hard work paid off. When he was ready for college, Teddy was strong and healthy. And there he is. It says Teddy's sideburns were growing into a beard when he was 17. That's his sideburns, the hair on the side. Chapter 3. Teddy enters politics. Teddy entered Harvard University in 1876. He was a bundle of energy. He worked and played hard. He talked all the time, and he loved books. He could read very fast, and he had an amazing memory. Years later, he could repeat things he'd read word for word. Teddy planned to be a scientist, but two things happened that would change his life forever. During Teddy's second year at school, his father died suddenly. It was a shock. Teddy's friends and family worried about him. They were afraid he would never get over his sadness. But Teddy was a man of action. He worked harder than ever to help take his mind off his troubles. Early in his third year at Harvard, joy came back into his life. He fell in love with a young woman named Alice Lee. Teddy and Alice planned to get married. Alice made it clear that she did not want Teddy to become a scientist. She didn't like the idea of cutting up animals or the smell of the chemicals he used. Teddy wanted to please Alice. He also wanted to honor his father. He could do that by working to make the world a better place. And here it says here, ready to run. Teddy ran track in college. Here he is in his running gear. And if he were famous, that would bring honor to the family name. He knew what he should do with his life. Instead of science, he would go into politics. And there's a picture of Teddy when he graduated from Harvard University, where he studied science. Teddy the lawmaker. By November 1881, Teddy was a married man. He was also an elected official. Teddy ran as a Republican candidate for the New York State Assembly, the lawmaking body of the state. Teddy was different from most of the others in the assembly. He stood out for several reasons. There was the way he looked. Teddy had his hair parted down the middle. He wore an eyeglass that clipped to his nose and hung from a chain. He liked fancy clothes. Teddy's background was different too. His family was wealthy. He had traveled around the U.S. and even to Egypt, and he had a university education. Most people in politics at that time did not come from rich families. They did not have college degrees, so Teddy seemed out of place in the state government. The other lawmakers soon found that Teddy was a hard worker. He worked to pass laws about who should get government jobs. Usually politicians would give jobs to people who helped them get elected. Teddy believed people should work in government only if they were good at their jobs. The public liked Teddy. When he ran for office again in 1883, he got most of the votes. Everything was going very well for the young lawmaker. Then, in early 1884, tragedy struck. Teddy and Alice had been expecting a baby. On February 12th, Alice Roosevelt had a little girl. The baby was named Alice after her mother. Teddy and his wife were thrilled. And there's a picture there where has Alice Roosevelt seated next to Teddy, and the woman on the right is Alice's cousin. The baby was healthy, but Teddy's wife became ill. At the same time, Teddy's mother, Mittie, was also very sick. On February 14th, his mom, Mittie, died. A few hours later, in the same house, Teddy's wife died too. On that same terrible day, Teddy lost his mother and his wife. Teddy felt his world had ended. He did not know what to do. He turned to his sister Anna and asked her to take care of the new baby. Anna thought Teddy should build a home for his daughter. Teddy owned a piece of land in New York on Long Island. He decided to build a large house there. He called his new home Sagamore Hill. Sagamore was the name of a Native American chief. The chief had used the hill as a meeting place in the 1600s. Teddy finished his term in the New York State Assembly. Then he had to get away. He headed west, leaving Alice at home with Anna. Teddy had always loved the outdoors. Being active and busy in the outdoors would help the young widower forget his deep sadness. A widower is a person who loses their husband or wife. And there's his home, Sagamore Hill, in Oyster Bay. There's Teddy. Teddy proudly poses in his new Western gear. He even took off his glasses for the photo. Chapter 4, Cowboy on the Range. Teddy moved to what is now North Dakota. The local people thought he was a pretty odd character. He talked like an Easterner. He seemed too small for the rugged Western life. And sometimes he wore glasses. That was very unusual for a cowboy. Everyone thought Teddy would find life hard out west. Too hard out west. But people would soon change their minds. Teddy rode out on the trail with a guide to hunt buffalo. The weather was cold and rainy. They couldn't find any buffalo, but Teddy never complained. In fact, he was having a wonderful time. It took 2 weeks for Teddy to find a buffalo, and he shot it. After he shot it, he did a little dance around it. He sent the animal's head back east. He wanted to have it stuffed to hang on his wall. A conservationist is born. Teddy loved being in the wild country. No matter how tired, wet, or hungry he got, he stayed in a good mood. Teddy loved nature. He thought it was beautiful and amazing. He studied every new plant or animal to see what he could learn. Teddy said a hunter should be a lover of nature as well as of sport, or he will miss half the pleasures of being in the woods. He realized that nature must be protected or it will disappear. People will tear it down or spoil it. People who try to protect nature are conservationists. One day, Teddy would become the greatest conservationist president in history. Teddy lived in the West for 2 years. When he headed back east, he was a changed man. He was tough and healthy. He would go back to politics, but his life in the West would always be a part of him. Teddy went home to Sagamore Hill. Now he could get to know his little daughter, Alice. He would also get to know an old friend again. Her name was Edith Carroll. Edith and Teddy had known each other as children. They met again after the death of Teddy's wife. Teddy and Edith got married at the end of 1886. The couple lived at Sagamore Hill with Teddy's daughter Alice. Over the years, Edith and Teddy had 5 more children: Theodore, Kermit, Ethel, Archibald, and Quentin. Teddy spent much of his time writing. He had written part of his first book while he was still in college. Throughout his life, he continued to write about history, nature, politics, and his own life. He wrote more than 45 books. He could have been a writer and nothing else, but that was not enough for Teddy. He had too much energy for just one career. He needed much more to do to keep him busy and happy. There's his family there. A new job. Teddy became a police commissioner in New York City. At the time, some of the police in New York were not honest. Some slept on the job instead of keeping the streets safe. Some would take money from criminals. In return, the police promised not to arrest the lawbreakers. Teddy walked through the streets late at night. He caught many police officers breaking the law. He made sure that anyone not doing his job would get in trouble. All his life, Teddy had believed that the problems of the poor were their own fault. But spending time in poor areas of New York City helped change his mind. Now he felt that the poor could not improve their lives if they were not paid fairly for their work. It made Teddy angry to see bosses get rich off of the labor of the poor. It was a lesson that he would always remember and try to do something about it later in his life. Chapter 5, Teddy and the Rough Riders. In 1897, Teddy was named Assistant Secretary of the Navy by President William McKinley. At about that time, trouble started brewing in Cuba, a small island in the Atlantic Ocean, 90 miles from Florida. In the 1890s, Spain was in control of Cuba. Teddy thought Spain should leave the island. He wanted the U.S. to be the only powerful nation in this part of the world. Most Cubans wanted Spain to leave too. Some Cubans joined together to try to kick Spain out. President McKinley tried to avoid war, but Teddy was eager for it. He thought the war would make Americans strong. He probably had another reason too. Teddy felt bad that his father had fought in the Civil War. He felt bad that his father had not fought in the Civil War. He wanted to make up for the fact and honor his family. And he didn't want to miss out on what he thought would be a great adventure. And there's Teddy in 1898. He got ready to head for Cuba, and there he led the Rough Riders. Remember the Maine. President McKinley sent a battleship, the Maine, to Cuba. Teddy thought it was a bully thing to do. Bully was Teddy's word for excellent. On the night of February 15th, 1898, the Maine exploded. 266 men were killed. No one knew the cause of the explosion, but many blamed Spain. Some newspapers said the United States should go to war. They made up stories about the Spanish attack. They knew that war would sell a lot of papers. Experts now believe the explosion was an accident. Spain had nothing to do with it. Teddy was thrilled. He believed Spain had attacked the United States, and now the United States could defend its honor. Teddy formed a volunteer army of 1,000 men. They were nicknamed Roosevelt's Rough Riders. The men fought at a place called San Juan Hill. Many soldiers were seriously wounded, and 89 died. Teddy was proud of his men, and he was glad the United States won the battle. He said it was the great day of my life. Chapter 6, President for a Square Deal. Newspaper writers had always liked Teddy. He did so many unusual things that he often made news. The Spanish-American War added to Teddy's fame. He was a great hero. By the end of 1898, he had been elected governor of New York. Voters loved Teddy. Reporters loved to write about him, but Republican leaders weren't so sure they trusted him as governor. Teddy was too popular and hard to control. He did what he thought was right, not what the party leaders wanted him to do. The leaders had an idea. In the next election, Teddy should be President McKinley's running mate for vice president. They thought he might listen more to the Republican Party leaders as a vice president than he did as the governor of New York. The McKinley-Roosevelt team won the election. They took office on March 4th, 1901. But the team didn't last too long. On September 6th, President McKinley was shot. He died 8 days later. Theodore Roosevelt became the President of the United States. Teddy was 42 when he became the youngest United States president. As president, he surprised everyone. He tried to make the country do what he thought it should. He used power in a new way. First, he went after the railroads. He wanted to make sure that they didn't join together to set high prices. When companies compete for customers, prices go down. If companies agree not to compete, prices go up. That's a monopoly, and it's against the law. For years, many businesses had ignored the law. Teddy changed that. He told business owners that they must not join together to keep prices high. They would have to compete against one another for customers, or he would make sure that they were brought to trial. He began with the railroads, but he did not stop there. As president, he used the law 45 times. Teddy used his power again to end the strike in the coal mines of Pennsylvania. Miners had stopped working because they wanted to be paid more to do. They wanted to be paid more to work only 8 hours a day. The owners wanted them to work more hours. The mine owners said they would not talk to the miners. They would just wait until the strikers gave up. But winter was coming. Teddy knew what people needed: coal to make heat. People needed coal to make heat. He said the owners had to talk to the miners. If they didn't, Teddy would bring in United States soldiers to work in the mines. The mines would run, but the owners wouldn't get paid. So the owners gave in. America the Beautiful. If you ever visit North Dakota, perhaps you will get to see Theodore Roosevelt National Park. The park was named in honor of the president because of his love of the outdoors and of nature. The park covers 70,447 acres in the wilderness of North Dakota. Today, the park is part of the National Park System, a United States government agency that's part of the Department of the Interior. Yellowstone, which was opened in 1872, was the first national park in the world. The National Park System includes natural and historic sites spread across the United States. Today, there is a national park in every state but Delaware. At the end, the workers got better pay and an 8-hour day. Teddy wasn't trying to favor the workers over the owners. He did what he thought was fair. He said all people should have a fair deal, or a square deal, as he called it. Teddy's great plans. It's no surprise that Teddy also used his power to protect nature. As president, he set aside about 230 million acres of land from Puerto Rico to Alaska. There are wild areas you can visit today because Teddy made them into parks a century ago. Teddy had another great plan. He wanted to build a canal in Central America. In 1900, sailing from Florida to California took a very long time. Ships had to travel all the way around Central America and South America. The trip was about 15,000 miles. Teddy wanted to build a shortcut. Panama was the best place for it. In Panama, a very narrow strip of land separates the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But there was a problem. Panama was part of another country, Colombia. Colombia didn't want the United States to build a canal. So the people of Panama decided to break away from Colombia. Teddy sent United States soldiers to help Panama fight. When Panama became a separate country, the United States could build the canal. Work on the canal began in 1904. Teddy was re-elected president the same year. In 1914, the first ship sailed through the canal. Now ships can move more quickly around the world. The canal helped the United States become a world power. During his second term, Teddy kept up his conservation work. He helped make it illegal to sell food and drugs that were not pure and clean. And in 1906, he won the Nobel Peace Prize, a very important award for helping to end the war between Russia and Japan. Teddy used the power of his office in a new way. He helped make laws that were fair for everyone. He pushed the country to act like a power. Chapter 7. Teddy and the Bullmoosers. Teddy left the White House in 1909. He wondered what he should do with his life now. He was only 50 years old. He felt that was much too young to stop working and retire. Teddy wanted to do something unusual, so he decided to go hunting in Africa with his grown son Kermit. Teddy wrote about his trip for a magazine, and he took along 3 animal experts to ship back the animals he killed. Today, the wild animals of Africa have been overhunted. Many of them are in danger of becoming extinct. It's against the law to kill most of them now, but in 1909 there were many, many more animals. No one thought it was wrong to hunt them. Teddy and Kermit killed 512 animals. There were lions, elephants, zebras, and many more. The experts sent the animals to the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Here is a picture of Teddy and his son Kermit. They sat atop a water buffalo that they killed on their trip to Africa. Back then, no one thought about the possibility of animals dying out. Teddy runs again. Teddy and Kermit headed home in June 1910. Teddy began making speeches all over the country for the Republican Party. He still had strong ideas about everything. Some of his ideas went against the Republicans' plan. It was almost time for the next presidential election. Teddy decided to run again, but the Republicans did not want him to be their candidate. So Teddy ran on the smaller Progressive Party ticket. At that time, American women could not vote. Many children worked rather than going to school. People could be made to work long hours. The Progressives said that these things were wrong. Teddy was feeling strong and in good health. He said he felt as fit as a bull moose. People began to call his party the Bull Moosers. One night, Teddy was on his way to make a speech in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when a man shot him. Teddy would not go to a hospital. Instead, he gave the speech with a bullet in his right lung. The crowd was amazed when they found out he was wounded. At the end of his talk, he went to the hospital. Doctors said it was safer to leave the bullet where it was than to operate. Although Teddy was very popular, he lost the election. Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, became the 28th president. Teddy and his bear. Teddy always loved hunting, whether in Africa or closer to home. In 1902, he went on a bear hunt in Mississippi. He couldn't find the bear. Finally, he had the chance to shoot a small bear that had been trapped, and Teddy said it wouldn't be fair. 2 days later, a cartoon was printed in a newspaper. It showed Teddy refusing to shoot a little bear. This gave a toy store owner an idea. He offered a stuffed bear for sale. A sign said Teddy's Bear, and so the teddy bear was born. This is the original teddy bear. That's how teddy bear started. They are making fun of Theodore Roosevelt, or Teddy as they called him. Chapter 8, Teddy and the One and Only. After the election, Teddy took another trip with Kermit, his son, and a group of explorers. This time they went to South Africa. Teddy wanted to explore a river in Brazil called the River of Doubt. No one had mapped it yet. It would be a dangerous trip, and Teddy was not healthy. He still had the bullet in his lung. His eyesight was failing, but his love of adventure won out. He said, "It's my last chance to be a boy again." They headed for the rainforest. Once they began to explore the river, they had no idea where it would lead them. The river was full of rushing rapids. The forest was full of biting insects. Several people died on the trip. Teddy was almost one of them. He hurt his leg badly, and he caught a dangerous sickness. Teddy knew that it would be hard for others to take a sick man out of the jungle. He told his son to leave him behind, but Kermit refused. He and the others carried Teddy out of the jungle. In the end, the trip was a success. Teddy and his group had completed the trip on the unexplored river. The government of Brazil renamed it Roosevelt River. The explorers had brought back thousands of animals for scientists to study. But at the end of the trip, Teddy was in very poor health. His leg never completely healed. The tropical fever that he caught in the jungle kept coming back. Farewell, Teddy. In 1917, the United States entered World War I. Teddy wanted to do his part, but it was too late for him. There was nothing he could do to help out. All of Teddy's sons went to fight. In 1918, his son Quentin was killed. Teddy was proud of his son, but his heart was broken. The war ended in November 1918. 2 months later, on January 6, 1919, Teddy died peacefully in his sleep. He was 60 years old. Teddy had always loved life. To him, it was an adventure. Teddy was brave and curious. He worked as hard as anyone could. He was a strong leader. He always did what he thought was right. Teddy loved the United States and was willing to die for it, and yet he always had the spirit and optimism of a young child. The United States had many colorful, inspiring, wonderful leaders, but there has only been one like Theodore Roosevelt. In 1917, Teddy was the star of the big parade in Chicago. He was honored for his explorations and for all his good works. Some fast facts. Presidential firsts. Teddy takes his first plane trip. Theodore Roosevelt was the first president to fly in an airplane, own a car, use a typewriter, go in a submarine, travel outside the United States while president, use a camera, win a Nobel Prize, create national monuments, and invite an African American to dine, which means to have dinner, at the White House. Talking about Teddy, the interview. Time for Kids editor Catherine Satterfield spoke with Charles Marcus. He works at the Sagamore Hill, which was Theodore Roosevelt's home, which is run by the National Park Service now. She asked, why should we be grateful to Theodore Roosevelt when we visit national parks? And the answer is the idea of setting aside areas in nature was first suggested by Theodore Roosevelt. He set an example that was followed by every president since his time. In the conservation world, what was Theodore Roosevelt's most important achievement? His most important achievement, the answer is he set aside 230 million acres of land for national parks, wildlife lands, and forests. That's about the size of the states on the East Coast from Maine to Florida. If he didn't set aside that land, people may have built on it many years ago. What will be his message to kids? Enjoy the natural world. Learn from it. Why is it important to set aside places such as Sagamore Hill in addition to wilderness areas? We better understand people's actions when we understand how they lived. It makes history real for us. It's what I call time travel. When you walk into Roosevelt's study and you see his pictures, his desk and his possessions, you feel a connection. His life and spirit are there. Monuments such as the Statue of Liberty are also run on the National Park Service. And this is just a small timeline of important dates about Theodore Roosevelt's life. In 1858, he was born on October 27th in New York City. In 1897, he was named the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. In 1898, he led the Rough Riders in a Spanish-American War and was elected governor of New York. In 1900, he was elected vice president, but in 1901, the President McKinley was shot and Roosevelt became president. In 1904, he was elected president again, and he began the Panama Canal. In 1906, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. In 1912, he tried to run for president again, but loses. In 1919, he dies on January 6 in Oyster Bay, New York. Other important things that happened.